Exactly. Joining us here on set, MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalas. Also with us, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and an MSNBC legal analyst, Joyce Vance. Full house this morning. Appreciate you guys coming in with us on this important day.
Making your first look debut, I believe, right?
I think maybe one other time.
Yeah.
In person.
Yeah. Give us your biggest moment, Joyce, from yesterday, something that really stood out to you.
Well, I think the biggest moment, and Danny, I'm not sure if you'll agree with me, but it was the closing argument that Adam Schiff gave, where he told the Senate floor, you all know that he's guilty, right? And then he talked about, assuming that we all know that he's guilty, what comes next? That maybe is a little bit of a leap of faith. We saw the tweets. There will be no Republicans publicly acknowledging that. But in that moment of silence on the floor of the Senate, I think everyone understood that. And we see it this morning. None of these arguments are about guilt. They're about process or about politics. Mm-hmm. They're not about the evidence.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems even Trump's defense is not to kind of combat the evidence. It's more to combat that it's not impeachable.
That's right.
So, that's exactly right, Eamon. Yes, it's actually, and I agree with what Joyce said, the closing arguments were very compelling. And that's actually going to be the defense. It's going to be that's true, but so what? It's legal for the president to do what he did, so why would we look at the motives? And I can't help but think that that's not really a very coherent argument, because we have so many crimes in our criminal code that criminalize something that is otherwise lawful if done with a bad motive. But that is what the defense is going to fall back on. They're going to say that because President Trump has this Article 2 power to root out corruption, just because he happened to hone in on one particular person who just so happens to be the son of a political rival, that's still okay as long as there was any scintilla of corruption. I think that's what we're going to end up seeing. I think the Democrats, the House managers, did a very good job of building their case and addressing in advance the defense's case, which is a very effective tool, because then when they stand up, the defense stands up with all of this passion, it's going to come in with a whimper.
Joyce, I want to get your take on the presentation of the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Burisma storyline. And basically saying this is why it doesn't hold water. Do you think by even addressing it on the Senate floor gives Republicans kind of ammunition to say this thing does hold water, and gives them the chance to say, well, if we're going to call witnesses here, we want to call Hunter Biden and we want to call former Vice President Joe Biden to the Senate floor to testify?
You know, this is a strategic decision that you almost always have to make as a prosecutor, right? Are you going to address the defenses or wait for the defendant to raise them? Here, everybody knew that this was coming. Hunter Biden was always going to be invoked by the Republicans. And I think it's smart of the Democrats to go ahead and take it on, to put the facts out there, because on the timeline, it's clear that there was no corruption. Whether or not there was bad business judgment is something that business ethics experts can debate. But in terms of pure legality and justification for the President of the United States, who, after all, could have had the Justice Department investigate. He didn't need to go to the Ukrainians, right? Didn't need to signal out the one company that happened to have involvement from a political opponent. So I think the Democrats headed off. They do a good job of that. Ultimately, whether or not it matters is still an open question.
We know that this is a bit of a political show. How do you feel when you, as a prosecutor, hear members of your jury come out and say the statements that they've been saying and demonstrating no impartiality like they were instructed to do by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? It's got to be somewhat painful as a lawyer to watch that happen, and that no one is following the rules. That's aside from what everyone is doing in the middle of the actual impeachment, getting up or reading a book or playing crossword puzzles.
Yeah, I think it's painful as an American to see people take an oath of impartiality and then just sort of shred it almost immediately. But Yasmin and I were having this conversation. Senators aren't really jurors, right? They're sort of amped up jurors. They have certain ability to decide what the law is and what the process is that typical criminal trial jurors do not have. Nonetheless, their apparent inability to set aside politics, even to listen to the evidence, not when they make their final vote, but to weigh the evidence fairly, that should be disturbing to all of us.
I mean, Denny, We can go so far as to say it seems misleading to the American public to identify these senators as jurors at this point when they have been completely forthcoming from the get-go, from the start, from the jump of all of this, which way they stand and which way they're likely going to vote. The majority of them, at least, aside from 4 or 5 that we feel like could feasibly vote in another direction if the tide changes.
They're not jurors, and this is an issue that was addressed via objection during the Clinton impeachment trial. One of the senators stood up and objected that they were being called jurors because they are, as Joyce said, so much more than jurors. They are the folks with the sole power to try an impeachment case. So they are both juror, they are judges, they are, in a sense, they exceed what we would normally expect for jurors.
They
so
make their own rules in some of these cases. With the Senate Majority Leader, they decide what rules they want to vote for.
In what Article 3 trial would the jurors be able to overrule the justice, the judge presiding over the trial? That makes them very unique.
I know this isn't a normal criminal case, but nonetheless, when you're choosing jurors in a criminal case, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know impartiality is of the utmost importance when you're choosing a juror.
Right, but that's why this is a trial like none other, because it is designed to have jurors who are the most partial, biased jurors you could ever have. That would be totally unacceptable in any Article 3 criminal trial in the judicial system, because they were elected for their bias. They were elected for their partiality. And that's why they sit, those 100 jurors, or whatever you want to call them, sit in those seats.
All right.
Jason
Wallace, Joyce Vance.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys both.
We're going to talk about the president's defense in the next segment, so be ready for that.
I'll be ready. I'll try.
That's your
specialty. All right, still ahead, everybody. We're going to dig into the new reporting about Senator Kamala Harris weighing a potential endorsement of the former vice president.
Plus, billionaire Michael Bloomberg's ad war against Trump appears to have gotten under the president's skin. We're going to tell you why. Those stories and a whole check on weather when we come right back.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.